There's a particular kind of quiet that settles around someone who has been right about something for a long time, but was never acknowledged for it. Not a peaceful quiet. More like the quiet of someone who has been holding their breath, waiting. Waiting to see if the other person would ever come around. Waiting to see if the universe would validate what they already knew in their bones. And the interesting thing I'm feeling as I sit with this energy today is that the waiting is starting to shift. Something is moving. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But something is changing beneath the surface of this situation, and I think a lot of you are beginning to sense it. There's a person in your life, or someone from your recent past, who has been carrying a version of events that isn't entirely honest. Not dishonest in the way someone consciously lies, but dishonest in the way pride works when it refuses to bend. They built a story around what happened between you. A story where they were justified. A story where the way things ended made sense if you looked at it from their angle. And for a while, maybe for a long while, they committed to that story. They needed to, because the alternative, actually sitting with the truth of it, was too uncomfortable. But here's what I'm picking up on. That story is cracking. You may not be able to see it from where you're standing. They haven't come to you. They haven't said the words. But something inside them has shifted, and it's been shifting for a while now, and the energy I'm feeling around them right now is not the energy of someone who has moved on cleanly. This is the energy of someone who thinks about you more than they want to. Someone who replays things. Someone who has caught themselves, maybe in a quiet moment, maybe in the middle of doing something completely ordinary, suddenly confronted with the realization that they weren't right. That you were. That they knew it then and they know it now. And that realization, when it lives inside someone who hasn't expressed it, who hasn't released it through honesty or accountability, it doesn't just dissolve. It sits. It grows heavier. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. Take what resonates with your situation, of course, not everything in a collective reading lands for everyone. But if you found yourself here, in this specific reading, I want you to stay with me, because what I'm being shown feels like it wants to reach someone specific today. The first thing I'm being drawn into is this energy around timing. And not timing in the vague, abstract sense that gets thrown around. What I mean is something very specific. I'm feeling like there has been a moment, or maybe it's approaching, where the universe is lining up the right conditions. Where the things that needed to happen, the things that needed to settle and fall into place, are now reaching a particular point. It's like everything that felt stagnant for so long is finally at a threshold. And here's what I find so interesting about this. Divine timing doesn't always feel like what we expect. We imagine it as this sudden arrival of everything we hoped for. But sometimes it looks like someone else's internal reckoning. Sometimes the timing isn't about your next chapter beginning, it's about the other person finally being brought to the truth that you already knew. And what I'm sensing is that this timing is real. This isn't wishful thinking on your part. The circumstances around this situation are shifting in a way that is pulling this other person toward a confrontation with themselves. And it's happening now, even if you can't see the full picture of it yet. Have you ever known something so clearly, with such certainty, that the hardest part wasn't the situation itself, it was watching someone else refuse to see what you already saw? That's the energy I keep circling back to with you. There's a weariness here that comes not from being wrong, but from being right and invisible. From carrying truth that was dismissed or minimized or turned around on you. And the thing I want to say, clearly, is that your perception was accurate. The things you felt, the things you named, the things you perhaps said out loud or kept to yourself, they weren't exaggerated. They weren't dramatic. They were correct. Now, this other person. Let me try to describe what I'm picking up from their energy, because it's layered. On the surface, there is still a kind of armor. A posture of being okay. Maybe even a posture of being unbothered. If you interact with them or if you see them from a distance, through mutual people, through social media, however that looks in your specific situation, what you might be picking up is a version of them that appears to have moved forward. That appears confident. They may even perform a kind of indifference when it comes to you or to what happened between you. But I want to be honest with you about something. Performance is not peace. And what I'm seeing underneath that surface is genuinely different from what they're projecting. Underneath the armor, there's someone who has been wrestling with things internally. There's a recurring thought pattern around you that they haven't been able to shake. And I want to be specific here because I think it matters. The thought pattern isn't just regret in a general sense. It's a very specific kind of recognition. The kind where you remember a moment, maybe something that was said, maybe a decision that was made, and you suddenly see it not through the lens of your own defensiveness, but clearly. And clearly doesn't feel good when it shows you that you were wrong. This is interesting. I'm getting an impression that there may be some movement toward wanting to express something. Whether that's an apology in a very direct and formal sense or something more subtle, a reaching out, an acknowledgement, something that signals a shift in how they see what happened, I feel like the impulse is forming. It's not fully formed yet. There's still something in the way. Ego, mostly. That protective layer of pride that got them into this situation in the first place. But the impulse exists. It's real. And the more time passes with the weight of unspoken truth sitting in them, the harder it becomes to maintain the fiction that everything is fine and that they were in the right. I keep hearing something. I want to be careful with this because I don't want to put words where they don't belong. But the energy keeps returning to something like, I should have listened. Not in a small way. In a significant way. And behind that is something even more vulnerable, something that's harder to say, I think I knew, and I chose not to. That is a different kind of thing to carry. Some of you may be realizing, as you sit with this, that this reading is touching on something you've suspected for a while but haven't been able to confirm. The validation you've been looking for, the moment where someone finally sees what you saw. I want to gently say that the universe does move toward truth over time. It doesn't always move quickly. It doesn't always move in the ways we want. But truth has a gravity to it, and it pulls things toward honesty eventually. What I'm feeling is that this is one of those moments of inevitable gravity. The energy shifts here. Because now I'm being pulled forward rather than into the past, and what I'm seeing forward is something that honestly surprised me when it came into view. Because I was expecting to find more of the same, more waiting, more distance, more of this holding pattern. But what I'm seeing instead is the possibility of something quite profound. There's a vision here. A future version of this situation that looks nothing like where things are right now. And I want to be careful about how I describe this because I don't want anyone to hear it as a guarantee or a promise that things will unfold in a particular way on a particular timeline. Free will is real. Choices are real. But what I'm looking at feels like a genuine potential path, and it's a path that involves real reconnection. Real depth. The kind of connection that doesn't feel rushed or surface level but grounded in something solid. In something that has been honestly examined and honestly rebuilt. What strikes me about this energy is that it has a quality of permanence to it. Not the fragile, performance-based connection that might have existed before, but something that feels like it has weathered something real and is stronger for it. Does this feel familiar to some of you? Does this resonate with what you've been quietly hoping for, even when you told yourself to stop hoping? You're not imagining this energy. Something is being built, even in the stillness of right now. I want to slow down here for a moment because I think this is important and I don't want to rush past it. The path toward that vision doesn't bypass accountability. And I think that's actually a really meaningful part of what I'm seeing. This isn't a situation where things just smooth over and everyone pretends the past didn't happen. What I'm feeling is that the potential here, the real depth of what could unfold, requires honesty. It requires someone, and I think we both know who I mean, sitting with what they actually did and what they actually avoided seeing, and choosing to meet that with something real instead of pride. And here's the thing. I believe they're moving in that direction, even if it's slow. Even if it's uncomfortable for them. Because I keep coming back to this image of someone who has been standing at the edge of a conversation they need to have, looking at it from a safe distance, knowing what it would require of them to step into it. And there's a stirring in them now that is making that distance feel less and less comfortable. There's something I want to say directly to you, to whoever is hearing this. The fact that you have been right does not mean you have to wait for them to acknowledge it before you can feel whole. I know that might sound like a contradiction given what we've been exploring in this reading, but it's something I feel strongly being placed here. Your peace cannot be conditional on their apology. Your knowing cannot require their confirmation. Part of what I'm sensing in your energy, and I say this with a lot of care, is that there is a version of this where you have already arrived at the truth of your own worth and clarity, and a separate version where you're still waiting for them to hand it to you. The invitation here is to fully inhabit the first version, because it is from that place that everything else I've described becomes possible. When you no longer need them to say, "You were right," in order to believe it yourself, something shifts. Not just in you. In the dynamic. The whole energy of the situation changes when someone stops making themselves smaller in order to make space for someone else's defensiveness. And interestingly, it's often exactly at that point that people start to show up differently. The energy I'm sitting with now feels warmer. There's something about the imagery that keeps coming forward, hands. Two people choosing, deliberately, to walk forward together. Not stumbling back into something old and familiar because it's comfortable or because the feelings never went away. But actively choosing. With eyes open. With the hard conversations already behind them or in the process of happening. This feels like something that has longevity to it. It feels like the kind of connection that, if it happens, neither person will enter into lightly. Because the cost of getting here, the truth that had to be faced, the pride that had to be surrendered, the patience that had to be maintained, all of that becomes the foundation rather than the obstacle. I want to sit with the energy of what's still stirring between these two people for a moment, because I think it's worth naming honestly. Whatever this connection is or was, there is something in it that hasn't gone quiet. Not for them. Not for you. I'm not saying love is simple or that history is easy to navigate. But I am saying that what I'm feeling here isn't the faint residue of something that has fully died. It's something that is, in a strange and uncertain way, still alive. Still flickering. And that flame, quiet as it is right now, feels like it's being kept alive for a reason. Sometimes the universe keeps two people in each other's awareness not as a punishment but as an invitation to do things differently. To choose more honestly. To love more completely. To approach each other with the kind of maturity that wasn't fully available before. I think that's what this is. For some of you this reading might be touching a relationship that you've been trying not to think about too much. Maybe you've told yourself to let it go, to move on, to stop caring about whether they ever come around. And I'm not going to tell you that the waiting is easy or that you owe anyone indefinite patience. You don't. But I will say that what I'm seeing doesn't feel like a closed door. It feels like a door that is slowly, almost imperceptibly, being pushed open from the other side. Not every step toward truth is dramatic. Sometimes it looks like someone going quiet. Sometimes it looks like a message that wasn't sent but was written. Sometimes it looks like someone asking a mutual friend a question they pretended not to care about the answer to. Sometimes it's invisible entirely, happening somewhere behind the scenes, in someone's private moments, in the middle of the night when they can't pretend anymore. That's where I feel this other person right now. In those private moments. In the quiet that reveals things. The thing about pride is that it requires constant maintenance. You have to keep feeding it, keep justifying it, keep building the case for why you were right and why the other person was the problem. And after a while, that becomes exhausting. The energy required to maintain a position you don't fully believe in starts to feel heavier than just admitting the truth. And I think that's where things are moving with this person. Toward the point where holding the line of pride becomes more costly than releasing it. I want to close by sitting with you for a moment rather than rushing to wrap things up. Whatever you've been carrying from this situation, whether it's hurt, or confusion, or the particular grief of being misunderstood by someone you cared about, I want you to know that the clarity you have is real. The things you saw and felt and knew are not distortions. You weren't asking for too much. You weren't being too sensitive. You weren't imagining things. And the path forward doesn't require you to shrink any of that. Trust the knowing inside you that has been steady even when everything else felt uncertain. Trust the part of you that kept believing in what this could be even when it wasn't reflected back to you. That trust, that quiet knowing, it's not naive. It's not weakness. It's actually one of the most courageous things a person can do, to keep faith with the truth of what they sense, even when the world around them hasn't caught up to it yet. The world is catching up. Walk forward carrying your own worth as something that was never in question. Whatever unfolds from here, whether it's the conversation that finally happens, the acknowledgement that finally comes, or simply the piece of your own clarity settling more deeply into your bones, you are already standing on solid ground. You always were.